going to try and keep this quick, short, controversial, and try and wake everyone up as much as possible because I see a lot of people on their phones. It's an honor for us to be here because Sameer is really pretty much the godfather of Indian broadcasting content. He ran India's biggest television channel, set up India's largest OTT player, and has now moved and is working directly on content. I really feel there's no one better than Sameer to sit and give us a sense of the landscape. So Sameer, to start with, what's really happening with Indian content? You know, I mean, everyone's talking about Netflix and sacred games. The sense that I get is that the action is really elsewhere. So how do you see it, yeah?
Well, actually, yeah, Netflix has created a lot of excitement. We are very excited. Sacred Games release, so that's been good fun. But you know, if you step back and if you look at India, and India in many ways is often compared to China, the 1.2 billion population and a giant market. But if you sort of segment the market and break it up into a few manageable parts, then what you really have is what are the first 100 million. These are the people who first got TV, first got mobile, first got internet, first got onto social media, first got onto e-commerce, you know, that gang. Yeah. These people are already spending $30 a month for a clutch of these services, you know, of TV, internet, mobile, entertainment kind of thing. Then there's the next 500 million, which are rapidly catching up, primarily because of 3 or 4 levers, primarily being the cheap data. So in the last couple of years with Reliance Jio, there's been this huge data revolution, which is taking, you know, connecting Indians very, very quickly. So now you've got a population of about 400, 500 million Indians who have smartphones, who've now got data at 15 cents a GB, and, you know, are completely connected. So it's like a really big sort of opportunity that's arising. And it's this market actually that really draws me because, you know, there's India. The other one thing that happened in India was that the TV business as a business sort of got stuck in the telenovela since 2000. So it's been like almost 2 decades now. So in a sense, India missed its HBO Showtime moment. We never made Sopranos, we never made House of Cards, we never did The Wire, we didn't do those things. We've been doing, you know, telling essentially Saas Bahu shows for the last 20 odd years. So that's the gap, you know, the premium drama series is a big gap. Netflix now, when something like Netflix arrives with this proposition of OTT, of premium drama, of binge viewing, those kind of things are really, you know, music to our ear, primarily because it's something that India doesn't have. And while Netflix is really appealing to, you know, the upper crust. So Netflix, I think their current sort of subscriber base would be 1 million. We are talking about 100 million and 500 million after that. So it's a question of price point and content, but it's exciting.
But I mean, what's the take that the Indian OTT players, whether it's All Balaji that you started, whether it's Heroes Now, I mean, what do they bring to the table that an Amazon or a Netflix doesn't from a content perspective?
Well, actually, I think the big opportunity here is the fact that because India does not have premium drama series, so, you know, like oftentimes you think that you can enter a market and solve the problem with money. But what money can do is buy, and in India it doesn't exist. So what you have to do is you have to create. And I think that's the big advantage for the local players, is that it's a level playing field in the sense that you've got to make these shows from ground up. There's no library. At the end of the day, Netflix was built on the back of the US networks, who had been doing premium drama series for 25 years. You know, it's not starting from ground zero. In India, we are making the first of these shows, you know, like everyone is doing it for the first time. So I think, I mean, it's to that extent, it's an even playing field, and there's lots of, between the telecom operators, between the broadcasters in India, between obviously the big foreign players and the independents, it's a very vibrant market. And it's not just Hindi, it's also the regional languages, you know, like we often tend to look at India in a very Hindi kind of lens, but it's all the languages, you know, so it's a pretty big kind of space.
But you've actually pivoted from it, right? And which I found a little interesting because you started All Balaji. In about 3 years, you took it to a place where the company was valued at about $250 million. Right. And it was just sort of starting to take off. And that's when you left to work on the content side. I mean, it felt like a very contrarian sort of decision. And what is your thought on that?
Well, actually, you know, because my sense was that there's so many platforms, and at some level it appears that it's easier to start a platform and, you know, sort of get going. And what India lacks is content, you know. So like, of course, we say that there are thousands of hours of content, but it's primarily catch-up TV, live TV, a lot of, you know, user-generated content. So it's a lot of all of that. Music, So I think the big opportunity really was in creating content, and since there are so many platforms, it's almost like a hybrid movie model where you sort of, you make the movie, you market the movie, and then you release the movie through a sort of a distribution chain. So we are having conversations with people, and there are interesting sort of platforms to talk to. So I thought it's an opportunity.
And are you looking at, what do you see as the role of regional language content when it comes to OTT and longer formats?
I think, listen, the big market in India is Hindi. It's regional. It's not, even internet in India is, we experience the internet in English, but it's actually Hindi, and it's really big. So it's a nice space, but like enough about me. You've created this huge talent company and this whole talent business that you've done. But while I bet on long form content, as in that's my bet, and I am a real big believer in SVOD, a subscriber driven model. You are focusing, more on short form snacking language content, which is ad supported. How does that how do you see that?
I feel honestly the economics of India have changed. I think if you look at traditional content, long form content, the barrier to entry was one, the cost of production and the cost of distribution. I feel that with shorter form content, whether it's music, whether it's comedy, the cost of production is much lower and the cost of distribution is almost zero. And we've seen success in India with people like AIB and all, but I've always said that to make someone stop watching Narcos and watch Sacred Games isn't disruption. But when you're sitting and providing content that every single one of those 500 million people can watch, I think that is disruption. And I think that people sit and, they'll check their phones on the way to the doctor, when customers, people want stuff that you can consume in quick bursts, which is why YouTube is so powerful in India. And I feel that a lot of the focus is about immersive 30-minute, 60-minute formats. And I feel that there's this huge opportunity in local languages for 2 to 7, 8 minutes that no one's really addressing. And if you can build that ground up, there's new forms of content creators. There's a guy called Bhuvan Bam on YouTube. He has 10 million subscribers. He's got more viewers than some of the biggest Bollywood stars. Right. So I feel that there's a whole content creator ecosystem that's emerging, but no one that's really supporting the creation of that content. And I think that that's really where a big opportunity lies.
You think that in this, there is enough of is there a monetization possibility, as in either in views or in advertising? How do you see that building out?
I think, I do think that there will be some sort of subscription model that will emerge, because we're seeing it happen with music already, right? With streaming services in India. And if you look at YouTube, half their Indian content is actually music-led content.
Right.
So I do think that I do see some subscription type revenue emerging, but I do see it as being fundamentally ad-driven in the short term. I think advertising in India is being disrupted at scale.
Right.
And I think that people are sitting and looking at things far differently from the traditional, 30-second TVC, print ad, etc. When I look at the work that we've been doing on the advertising side with people like Unilever or Future Group or P&G, we've realized that we are not really a talent business. We are a content and marketing platform. And we have and when we look at the next 10 years, our goal is not to sit and disrupt the process of movie creation. Our goal is to sit and make traditional Indian advertisers obsolete. So I'm saying right here, whether it's JWT, whether it's Ogilvy, I think they're dinosaurs. They are dying and they don't realize that they're dying, and in 10 years they will not exist.
And advertisers are moving on with this.
Absolutely.
Right?
Today, when a Unilever sits and after 20 years says that for my creative brief, I will not go to a JWT or to a Low, but come to a Quant so that we can work directly with the creators of popular culture. Right. It's a seminal moment, It's a once in a generation opportunity that's happening in Indian content that I think there are fortunes to be made and empires to be built. It's a unique time.
Yeah, it is. It is. Actually, it's a super exciting time. Tell me something I've always wanted to know. There was this big, big revolution of indie pop music in the 90s in India. Yeah. And then that sort of in 2000 died out and got sort of folded back into Bollywood. Yeah. The music business in India is driven for the most part by what is called film music. Yeah. So now with all this opening up with new streaming devices, with getting to customers directly, getting rid of the gatekeepers, you think there's a significant scope of reviving and growing independent non-film music?
Absolutely. I think that, again, like we spoke earlier, I think the barrier to entry was both, again, production as well as distribution costs. Right. Even if you sat and you had those pop stars, the distribution only happened on the back of broadcasters, right? Or radio. They couldn't control that. The movie stars owned that airspace. But today we have something that's compelling. I think it's really possible to reach out to people directly. Like when I look at hip hop in India, today some of these hip hop stars are bigger than movie stars, and there's this new emerging sound that's coming from the streets and in the slums. I think sometimes we live in the past because it feels almost like we're in America in the mid 90s when it moved from Hammer and Vanilla Ice to really being representative of what the people is. But people want to consume culture, and culture has got to be relevant. And I think there's more to Indian popular culture than a Bollywood star, and I think that's especially true of music. Speaking of this bit of sort of India sort of being compared to living in the past, being compared to other countries, one of the things I noticed yesterday and again today was the number of people who are comparing India to China, which I don't know if it's really as accurate as people seem to think it is. I mean, what's your take on the whole India-China comparison?
Actually, because we are the two world's largest markets, 1.2 and 1.4 billion, so the comparisons are obvious because they are the last, markets left for conquest and all of that. But actually, they're pretty different because China, especially in the media business, China has been a protected environment. The media business in China is protected by the government, and it's therefore got a whole bunch of firewalls around it, which allows the Chinese companies to grow without, in a sense, the US competition. India, on the other hand, is completely open. So the big players in India are Google and Facebook and YouTube, and they come, and there's no sort of regulation that favors the Indian. There are some sort of foreign investment regulations, but nothing significant. So to that extent, they are from an operating business point of view, they're totally different, because the Indian entrepreneur has got to compete with US majors who've got a significant head start in both technology and business and revenue, as in a sort of a base. But that being said, it's called freedom. So you get to do a lot of stuff, and you can do different things, you can partner with people and all of that. So it's interesting, but I think in both cases, even yesterday I heard this conversation about China and about the 1.4 billion people, but I guess even there is that sense of segmentation. There is the first 100, 200 million who are already doing it and can pay for it. Then it comes to the people who are catching up, and then the rest. And I'm really, when you talk about markets and whether it's an ad supported or a subscriber supported, the third thing that's happening in India is the data supported, which is the data video on demand, which is essentially the big data boys who want you to consume data and in a sense give you the content free. That's another model, DVOD, if you will. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time, but it's different markets.
One of the things I see in India is how the telcos, right? And I look at it with Jio, I look at it with you guys. It's almost as though the telcos don't see themselves as providers of infrastructure, but more and more as producers of content. Could you just share a little bit more on that?
Well, actually,
why is that happening?
They've recently started doing that because when you look at their numbers, like if you take a Vodafone Idea, post merger they'll have 120 million 4G customers. Reliance Jio has about 140 million 4G customers. Airtel has another 120, 30 4G customers. That's absurd numbers. These are customers who've already got 4G connections, you've already got their billing data. Most of the telcos have got video streaming platforms built into their services, and they can just pipe it through. And I think they're only just waking up to that, to the fact that they are not telecom operators, but actually video streaming and services platforms. And that's where the real value and the real money is. Because data is a commodity. So to that extent, you can keep crashing the price of data, but content is not a commodity. Price up and down does not commoditize content.
I found it really fascinating. When I look at Reliance Jio and their plans in terms of content, they're putting together more movies and more shows over the next 18 months than Disney, Fox, Viacom, Netflix and Amazon put together. So it's then a completely different beast. The whole ecosystem of content seems to be changing.
And actually a lot of these guys are approaching it in that manner as well. When you do the numbers and you do the math, then you figure that, listen, 200 million people paying me $10 a month or $20 a month is good to go. Like it's a good play. But there's a lot of focus in this. How do you see talent reacting to this whole new digital world, if you will.
I mean, if I look at the fact that India's #1 YouTuber, if you put him, he's probably one of the top 15 or 20 highest paid celebrities in India today. I think people are realizing that this is a completely blue sky opportunity. And here, and you're not really dependent on someone else believing in your talent. If you believe in yourself and you have that talent, you can go out there and really showcase it. And I think it really taps into sort of the cultural zeitgeist of the moment, right? It's a young country, it's full of aspiration, it's full of dreams. And I think that this really allows people to sort of go out there and live to that belief here. I have one last question before we open up to the audiences. We've spoken about different kinds of content creators. What do you see the future of sports content when it comes to the digital world? Yeah.
Well, actually, for India, sports is still young in that sense that, you know, we are still cricket,
Yeah.
and life begins and ends with that. But I think other sport is building. All other traditional sport, whether you take football or now kabaddi, which has become such a big deal, it's sort of growing. But I think a bigger opportunity or a bigger scare for traditional sport is going to be e-sport, because we are going to be very quickly a connected audience, and somebody is going to crack it, that, you know, you don't actually have to get out and play on a field, because you can, you know, connect 500 million Indians and have them play online. It's not happened. Actually, we don't have a big online gaming ecosystem. We don't have an e-sport ecosystem. But, you know, in true style, I think India could leapfrog into that tomorrow. So I think, but sports got to grow, it will grow, I guess. Yeah.
We don't have that much time left, just for maybe 2 or 3 questions from the audience. I mean, Sameer's coming here after a very, very long time, so if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them, yeah.
Right.
I can't really see anything though, to be very honest.
I don't think anyone has a question.
Okay, I can't really see anything in the audience. So, Sameer, do you have anything just in closing that you want to just sum up in terms of where you see the opportunity? We speak a lot, I think, about the number of consumers that are there in India. We speak a little bit less about the revenue that it's possible to make in India. We speak the least about the value creation opportunity in India.
Right.
Whereas if you look at enterprise value that's being created, I mean, if I just look at Eros now and All Balaji alone, just 2 companies out there, that didn't exist 3-4 years ago, and those 2 companies alone are worth about 500 million, right? So just talk a little bit about it from an enterprise value perspective. Where do you see the opportunity?
You know, oftentimes when you talk about India, and there's always this thing about monetization and the ability to make money, you know, and that Indians don't pay, and therefore it's very hard to make money. But that's not true, because actually Indians pay for everything. You know, historically Indians have paid for cable TV. The problem was that the cable TV operator didn't pay the broadcaster. So that was always the dispute, you know, as in we are not getting enough money from the market, it was not from the people. So consumers pay. Consumers even today are paying for everything. We pay for movies, we pay for TV, we pay for telecom. So I think the opportunity is really to go out there. It is low-hanging fruit. In many ways, India, you know, playing catch-up now with the connectivity, has not seen a lot of things, you know, and it's just a question of going out there, investing in content. The problem is that most people try and put revenue first and then try and figure it out. Whereas if you put money behind content and go and build habits, go and build a market, go and build customers, there's a lot of money to be made. And then that leads to then valuations and opportunities. And because there's, you know, India is open for investment, it allows, you know, sort of everyone to, you know, get in and build out businesses. So that's my sort of, you know, view on it.
Thank you so much for your time, Sameer. We are pretty much out of time. I don't think we have time for more questions. But I hope that you're going to be around. There's a lot of people that are looking at India, that are looking at content. We have Sundar coming on stage next, who's really a veteran on the sports side. He promised to sit and do a little jig for us at the end of this. We'll be around if anyone wants to catch up. I know that from my time it matters, I know that there's a lot of conversations that happen offline. And when we talk about fortunes that are there to be made, I feel that if Jasper and gang took a cut of fortunes that were made, that were germinated here at Matters, I think they'd be very, very, very rich. But thanks, guys, and we'll see you again next year.
Thank you all. Thanks.